The day the money stopped. The envelope was taped to the front door, my name scrawled in my father's messy handwriting, and inside was a single key to a safety deposit box I didn't know existed. For 27 years, I believed my father was a ghost. Not the kind that haunts old houses, but the kind that haunts your memory. A vague impression of a large hand holding mine, the faint scent of sawdust and coffee, a deep laugh that seemed to rumble from somewhere in the floorboards. I was 4 years old when he left for work one morning and simply never came back. My mother, a woman carved from resilience and quiet grief, told me he had to go away for a while, then for a long while, and finally that he wasn't coming home at all. She never said a bad word about him, which somehow made the absence worse. It was a void without a villain, a mystery without a clue. My name is Alex, and I grew up in a small, rain-swept town on the Washington coast called Port Sterling. My mother, Nora, raised me on her own, working double shifts as a nurse at the county hospital. She was my entire world, a steady, loving presence in a life defined by a single, gaping question mark. I never pushed her for details about my father. I could see the way her eyes would get distant, the slight tremor in her hands when his name was accidentally mentioned by a well-meaning relative. So I let him become a myth, a story with no ending. My life was unremarkable in the best possible way. I studied hard, got a scholarship to university on the other side of the state, and fell in love with graphic design. I met a woman named Isabel during my junior year. She was a literature major with a wild laugh and a talent for seeing the best in people, especially me. We built a life together in a bustling neighborhood in Seattle, a world away from the fog and quiet of Port Sterling. We got married in a small ceremony on Alki Beach, the Seattle skyline glittering in the background. A few years later, our daughter, Lily, was born, and the world finally fell whole. The ghost of my father was just that, a distant, harmless specter. Then, 6 months ago, my mother died. It was sudden, a massive stroke that stole her from us in a single, cruel afternoon. The grief was a physical weight on my chest, a constant ache. Isabel held me while I wept, and Lily, just 5 years old, would pat my hand and offer me her favorite stuffed rabbit, her small face scrunched in concern. In the weeks that followed, as we sorted through practicalities of death, I had to return to Port Sterling to clear out my childhood home. The house on Cedar Street was exactly as I remembered it, small, weather-beaten, but filled with the scent of my mother's lavender sachets. Going through her things was an archaeological dig of our lives. I found my old report cards, my first set of crayons, the quilt she made when I was born. It was in her bedroom, in the back of her closet, behind a stack of neatly folded winter sweaters, that I found the box. A simple wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, with a brass clasp. It wasn't locked. Inside, nestled on top of a stack of yellowed papers, was a single key and a note in my mother's careful handwriting. Alex, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you this myself. Your father didn't leave us. He was taken from us. I hid the truth to protect you. Go to the bank on First Street, box 217. Everything is in there. I love you more than anything. Be brave. Mom. My hands were shaking so badly I had to read the note 3 times. He was taken from us. The words didn't make sense. Taken? By whom? 1,000 terrifying scenarios flooded my mind. I called Isabel immediately, my voice thick with confusion and a burgeoning dread. She listened without interrupting, her calm presence a lifeline across the phone line. The next morning, I was at the First Street Bank the moment the doors opened. The safety deposit box was small and unremarkable. I took it to a small, private room they provided. My heart hammered against my ribs as I inserted the key and lifted the lid. Inside was a thick manila envelope and a single, smaller key taped to the inside of the box. I opened the envelope first. It contained a stack of documents. The first was a faded newspaper clipping from a paper I didn't recognize, dated over 27 years ago. The headline read, "Local businessman vanishes amidst financial scandal." Below it was a grainy photo of my father, Daniel. He was younger, smiling, his arm around a man I didn't recognize. The article detailed how he and his business partner, a man named Arthur Vance, had been under investigation for embezzlement from their own construction firm. But before any charges could be filed, my father had disappeared. His car was found abandoned near the Canadian border. The implication was clear. He had fled, guilty as sin. I felt a cold wave of nausea. This was the story my mother had hidden, that my father was a thief and a coward, but the note said he was taken. I dug deeper into the envelope. The next document was a private investigator's report, dated 6 months after my father's disappearance. It was commissioned by my mother. The PI, a man named Richard Cole, had a different theory. He wrote that while the embezzlement was real, the evidence pointed away from my father and squarely at Arthur Vance. Vance had been siphoning funds for years, cleverly forging my father's signature. The report stated that my father had discovered the fraud the day he vanished. He had an appointment with their company lawyers that afternoon. He never made it. The last document in the envelope was a handwritten letter. It was from my father, addressed to my mother. The paper was creased and fragile. The handwriting was rushed, panicked. "Nora, if you're reading this, I'm in trouble. It's Arthur. He's been stealing from us. Millions, I think. I confronted him this morning. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with these cold eyes and said, 'You should have let it go, Danny.' I'm scared. I'm going to meet with a lawyer. But I had to get this to you first. Hide it. If something happens to me, don't trust anyone. Not the police, not the company. Arthur has friends everywhere. I love you. I love our boy. Tell Alex I'll come home. I promise I'll find a way home. Daniel." I read the letter until my eyes burned. He didn't leave us. He was going to be a victim. He was scared, and he was trying to protect us. The key taped inside the box. I picked it up, its cool metal a stark contrast to the heat flooding my body. It was a modern key, not old like the others. It was to a storage unit. The address was printed on a small tag attached to it. A facility in a town called Clearwater, about 2 hours from Seattle. For the next few days, I was a ghost in my own life. I told Isabel everything. We pored over the documents together, trying to make sense of this impossible puzzle. My father had been gone for 27 years. Arthur Vance. I looked him up. He was still alive, a wealthy and respected businessman living in a gated community outside of Seattle. His company, Vance Holdings, was a local powerhouse. The narrative of the old embezzlement case had been successfully spun. Daniel was a scapegoat, the man who had run away, and Arthur was the wrong partner who had bravely rebuilt the company from the ashes of scandal. The sheer injustice of it was a physical blow. I knew I had to go to the storage unit. I couldn't bring the documents to the police. They were decades old, and without new evidence, it would be my word against the word of a pillar of the community. This unit was my only lead. Isabel insisted on coming with me. We dropped Lily off at her parents and drove to Clearwater on a gray, overcast Saturday. The storage facility was a sprawling, impersonal complex of identical garages. We found Unit 317, a small, interior unit on the ground floor. My hands were slick with sweat as I inserted the key. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed deafeningly loud in the silent corridor. I pulled up the heavy metal door. The unit was dark, and the air that rushed out was stale and cold. Isabel shone the flashlight from her phone inside. It wasn't packed with furniture or boxes of old clothes. In the center of the small, empty space was a single steel filing cabinet. That was it. We dragged it out into the dim hallway light. It had 4 drawers, all locked, but the key for the storage unit was on a ring with 2 smaller keys. The first one I tried opened the top drawer. Inside were meticulously organized files, bank statements, contracts, personal letters. It was a treasure trove. It was a proof. As I rifled through files, the full scope of my father's plan became clear. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was an insurance policy. He must have suspected Arthur would try something. He had copied everything. The real financial records showing Arthur's theft, the forged signatures, threatening letters Arthur had sent him when my father first started asking questions. There were even recordings on old cassette tapes, labeled with dates. My father had been gathering evidence for weeks, and in the bottom drawer, I found the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't a document, but a photograph. It was a picture of a man much older now, with silver hair and a hard, smug smile, standing on the deck of a large yacht. It was Arthur Vance, clipped from a recent Society magazine. Taped to the back of the photograph was a single, typed line on a small piece of paper. He got away with it. Don't let him. It wasn't my father's handwriting. This message was for me. My father hadn't just hidden evidence. He had hidden it for someone to find. For me, he had left a trail, a cold case file waiting for its detective. And for 27 years, my mother had guarded the first clue, waiting for the right moment, or perhaps dreading it, until she was gone and the choice was mine. The discovery of the storage unit opened a floodgate of emotions. Grief for the father I never knew, rage at the man who had stolen him from us, and a fierce, burning need for justice. But the story wasn't over. The final chapter was yet to be written, and it was one I never could have predicted. The key had unlocked more than just a filing cabinet. It had unlocked a past that was very much alive, and a danger that had been patiently waiting in the shadows for 27 years. The question was, what was I going to do with it? And more terrifyingly, what would Arthur Vance do when he found out I had it? I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Arthur Vance was too powerful, too connected. A stack of old papers from a dead man's secret storage unit wouldn't be enough. I needed proof that was undeniable, proof that tied him directly to my father's disappearance. The cassette tapes. I had to find a way to listen to them. I needed a plan. The first person I thought was an old college friend named Sam. Sam was a tech wizard, the kind of guy who could build a computer from scratch and make old technology sing. He ran a small audio forensics lab, mostly doing work for musicians and podcasters, restoring old recordings. I called him that night, my voice tight with nervous energy I couldn't shake. Sam, it's Alex. I know this is a weird ask, but I have some old cassette tapes. They're over 25 years old. I need to know what's on them, and I need it to be official, legible. Can you help? Sam, ever the enthusiast, was intrigued. Old cassettes? Like vintage audio? Sure, bring them by. I've got a Nakamichi Dragon deck that eats old tapes for breakfast. It might take some work, but we can get a digital transfer. The next day, I drove to Sam's studio, a converted warehouse in Georgetown. I handed him the box of tapes. There were a dozen of them, each labeled with a date in my father's now familiar handwriting. The earliest was from a month before he disappeared. The last was dated the day before he vanished. Sam worked for 2 days. He called me on a Tuesday evening. Alex, you need to get down here. Now! His voice was different, stripped of its usual casual cheer. Isabel and I went together. Sam's face was pale as he sat us down in front of his large monitor. The audio quality is surprisingly good, he began, his voice quiet. Your father was meticulous. He recorded phone calls. He hit play. The first few were mundane business calls, conversations with suppliers. But then we got to the tapes from the final weeks. The calls between my father and Arthur Vance were electric with tension. My father's voice was calm but firm, asking pointed questions about accounts. Arthur's voice was smooth, oily, deflecting, reassuring. But in the last call, the mask slipped. My father's voice on tape. "Arthur, I have the statements. The offshore accounts. I know everything. It's over. I'm going to the authorities tomorrow." There was a long pause on the recording, filled only with static. Then Arthur's voice, cold as ice. "You're making a terrible mistake, Daniel. A fatal one. Think about your wife. Your little boy. Wouldn't you rather just walk away? Disappear? I can make that happen. A nice sum of money. A new life somewhere sunny." My father's voice was hard. "You're threatening my family? You son of a bitch. This conversation is over." Arthur's laugh was low and chilling. "It's not a threat, Daniel. It's a promise. Sleep well." The tape ended. The room was silent. Isabel was gripping my hand, so hard her knuckles were white. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This was it. Proof. A direct threat on my father's life. "There's more," Sam said quietly. He queued up the next tape. This one was recorded the next morning, the day my father vanished. The call was short. My father's voice, "I'm coming to your office. Arthur, we're going to settle this face to face." Arthur's voice, calm and controlled. "I'll be waiting, Daniel. Come alone." Then nothing. We sat in stunned silence for a long time. Sam finally spoke. "Alex, this is evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. You have to take this to the police." I knew he was right, but the fear was a cold knot in my stomach. This man had gotten away with it for 27 years. He was rich, powerful, and had everything to lose. What would he do when he found out we were coming for him? The next morning, I called a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Lynn, who specialized in cold cases and wrongful convictions. She listened to my story, reviewed the documents and the digital copies of the tapes, and her face hardened with determination. "This is substantial, Alex," she said. "This isn't just a hunch. This is a roadmap. But we have to be smart. We don't go to the local police. We go to the state attorney general's office. This is big enough for them." The following week was a blur of meetings, of retelling the story to solemn-faced investigators, of handing over the evidence my father had died to protect. The attorney general's office moved quickly, quietly. They reopened the 27-year-old missing person case as a homicide investigation. They started building a case against Arthur Vance. And then the world erupted. The news broke on a Thursday morning. I was at my desk trying to focus on a design project when my phone started buzzing incessantly. It was Isabel. "Alex, turn on the news. Now." On every channel, the same story. Prominent Seattle businessman Arthur Vance arrested in connection with a decades-old disappearance. The footage showed him being let out of his mansion in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock and fury. The reporters were in a frenzy. The secret tapes, the forged documents, the decades of lies, it was all spilling out into the public eye. For a week, the story dominated the news. More victims came forward. Other people Arthur had swindled or intimidated over the years. The picture of the respected businessman crumbled, revealing a lifelong criminal. The evidence from the storage unit was the cornerstone of the case. My father, the man branded a thief and a coward, was posthumously cleared. His name was restored. The trial was a media circus, but the evidence was too strong. Arthur Vance was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and a host of financial crimes. He was sentenced to life in prison. He was 68 years old. He would die there, In the months that followed, I felt a strange, hollow peace. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring my father back. It didn't give me the childhood I should have had. It didn't ease the ache in my mother's heart that she carried for 27 years. I visited his grave for the first time, a small, simple headstone my mother had placed in the Port Sterling Cemetery, marked with his name and the date he was born. The date he died was left blank, replaced with the words taken from us. I knelt in the damp grass and told him everything. I told him about my mother, about how strong she was, how she never stopped loving him. I told him about Isabel, about Lily. I told him I had found his clues, that I had finished what he started. I told him I was proud of him. A few weeks after the trial, I received a thick envelope in the mail. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter from a man named Richard Cole, the private investigator my mother had hired all those years ago. He was now in his 80s, living in a retirement community in Arizona. He wrote that he had followed the trial closely, that he had always known Daniel was innocent, that he was so sorry he couldn't prove it in time. And then, at the bottom of the letter, he mentioned something that made my blood run cold again. "There was one thing I never put in my report, Alex," he wrote. "Something your mother asked me to keep quiet. The day after your father vanished, a man came to your house. He was rough, intimidating. He told your mother that if she ever tried to find Daniel, if she ever talked to police, he would come back for you. He made her choose your father's memory or your safety. She chose you. She chose to let the world think the worst of him to keep you alive. She was the bravest woman I ever met." I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands. The final piece of the puzzle. The reason for the silence. The reason for the hidden box. The carefully timed revelation. My mother hadn't hidden the truth to protect my father's reputation. She had hidden it to protect me. She had carried the burden of that secret, the weight of knowing her husband was likely murdered and being unable to seek justice, all to keep her son safe. She had loved me that much. I thought about the note she had left me in the box. Be brave. She wasn't just telling me to be brave in the face of the truth. She was telling me to be brave enough to live the life she had sacrificed everything to give me. The key wasn't just to a storage unit or a safety deposit box. It was a key to understanding. It unlocked the truth about my father, but more importantly, it unlocked the truth about my mother. The quiet, steady woman who raised me alone wasn't just resilient. She was a hero. She was a guardian who had stared into the face of evil and made the impossible choice to protect the one thing that mattered most. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I walked into the living room, where Isabel was reading a story to Lily. I sat down on the floor next to them, leaned my head against Isabel's knee, and watched my daughter's face as she listened, enraptured, to a tale of dragons and princesses. The ghosts of the past were finally at rest. My father, a good man who fought for the truth. My mother, a brave woman who sacrificed everything for love. And me, standing in the light of their legacy, holding the key to a future they both had fought to give me. The story didn't end with trial or conviction. It ended here, in this small, warm room with the people I loved. And it was exactly where I was supposed to be.